Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we have gathered and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and thank Auntie Lynette for her very warm welcome this morning. And it's been an absolute privilege being a part of today as a philanthropic funder. I haven't really met that many in the room. I'm not sure how many of you are out there. Maybe if you could put your hand up if you're in the philanthropy sector. I know the Wyatt Trust. And I think it's so rare that members of philanthropy actually get to engage in new practice like this. And so before I go into my sort of comments, to leave you and for you to perhaps consider, I want to make it really clear I'm here as a philanthropic funder, not a practitioner, so there's a lot for myself and for my sector to learn in this space of supporting collective impact, and in particular for the 1020 Foundation, place-based, child-focused collective impact. And I'll just quickly make a comment. It was a fascinating panel, that last panel. And before I came up, I thought, gosh, I'd like to just clarify, without being controversial, a couple of things that were raised for me and which I think are really important in the intent of having days like this where we can hear and listen and respond and actually deep dive on the next stage of the journey. And so one of the things I just wanted to really put parameters around before I move into what I'm going to say is that this collective impact approach, particularly around local innovation and community place-based collective impact, is not for all communities. It's important, I think, to understand the practice, but not all communities are ready for it. And even if they've got some resources and capacity to do it, they still won't be able to continue along the long journey of systemic and local innovation. And it's not to be negative, I think it's just a reality. And the other point I would like to make is around cultural change and the difference between public sector cultural change generally and the cultural change we're talking about across different sectors to be able to engage in collective impact. So I just wanted to sort of put that framework around where I'm going to move to next. In 2013, I sat with a group of non-profit, government and philanthropic leaders in a room in Adelaide, convened in a new conversation, which has now become all of you and the movement of Together South Australia. And this was catalysed by a number of people, but I do want to acknowledge someone in this room that was a really early change maker in this, and I find often in this work, which we know builds on years and years and years of hard work, sometimes these people just blend into the landscape. And Jill McFadgen from Community South Australia is a very quiet and effective conductor, because I'm amazed at where this has got to. Thank you, Jill, and thank you for involving 1020 in the learning. The intent was bold. The group grappled with how they could change the way they work together to create better futures for all South Australians, but particularly those that struggled and where there were places of intergenerational disadvantage. And this was especially the case given the complexity of the social, environmental and economic challenges some of the regional and urban South Australian communities were burdened with at this time. And of note, this was a time when GMH was changing and winding back its manufacturing operations in South Australia, and there was a lot of fear. The leaders were asking, what can we do? And most importantly, how do we do it? Within a system that is no longer allowing us to share equity and equality in the decisions we make about our collective futures. And I think it's remarkable that now, and I think it's 4.5, almost 5 years later, I see a movement that's taking place in this state and around Australia. And it's a quiet movement, and it's a really specific cultural movement. It's a pioneering one, And I hope that where it's appropriate, it will be embraced more widely, because it's a movement of values that runs counter to and in spite of the problematic state of many of our political structures and organisational structures and systems, and the lack of institutional leadership that we see, particularly in the media. It's a community movement dedicated to building new ways of doing things for its citizens and stakeholders, and it has at its centre the ideas, voices and lived experiences of those that are often left behind or forgotten in the noise. And it's a movement about what it's going to take to build a prosperous, inclusive and engaged Australia where everyone gets the chance at the right time for the best opportunities in life, and a place where the lottery of birth, which does dictate, we know, all the evidence says, our early experiences for family and community, and doesn't necessarily mean that these predict the direction of your life. So I just want to, this afternoon, as the closing keynote, reflect on how many of us are starting to think and work differently to break cycles of entrenched disadvantage here in South Australia, but actually more broadly. I'm based in Victoria and Melbourne, and the same conversations and gatherings are going on there. For I think the question that everyone's grappling with here today, both as South Australians but as a nation, is not why or even what needs to change to tackle some of these complex problems. We have a lot of research, we have a lot of data. The question that I'm interested in, and what has engaged me today, is what's the emerging practice in the how of developing new leadership, new organising mechanisms and structures, new networks and new community connections, so that we can enable better collective results for more people. And how do we improve, and this is something as a funder I ask, the capacity for sharing, the learning, the measuring and the communicating that we need to do to ensure these efforts actually have the time to realise population level change. Because the timeframes we're talking about are really different than particularly those typically that government funders, philanthropic funders, corporate funders can get their heads around. It's an ongoing challenge. So I'll just quickly touch on four key themes. The promising progress that comes when we do start to respond differently and build greater evidence on how to describe what we do. The changing role of funders in catalysing and seeding high potential collective impact approaches, and how funders are trying and starting to engage with this emerging evidence. The four areas of new knowledge that 1020 have observed in our 5 years working with communities that we feel will influence lasting systemic change and are particular to the work of collective impact. And the importance in that of these new intermediaries like Together South Australia and Opportunity Child, and I think Michelle Lucas mentioned the emergence of new intermediaries is something we're going to see. And I think the importance of these intermediaries is that they're providing critical new evidence, opportunities for peer-to-peer learning and capacity building, as well as the ability to connect up the local work that you all do to influence policy at the state and national levels. And it's the connecting that is the important role across the system that these intermediaries can do. All too often we want quick and easy solutions, and we know that this is a different formula. And it's a formula, though, that is only for, as I said earlier, specific types of issues. And so much, I feel, in this complexity is common sense, which is the frustrating thing about it. What I see in this long-term systemic work across communities and organisations is that when we invest in the creation of new knowledge, evidence and practice, and when we at the same time support this with smart learning networks that connect up the local insights and challenges, we actually do make progress.